The Beer Hall Putsch, 1923. A revolution in a bar. Let's start in Germany, 1923. The country was in chaos after World War I. Inflation was skyrocketing, the economy was collapsing, and political tension was everywhere. Enter Adolf Hitler, then just a fringe political agitator leading the Nazi Party. He decided it was time to seize power in Munich and start a national revolution. And where did he begin? Inside a beer hall. On November 8th, Hitler and his followers stormed the Bürgerbräu Keller, a large Munich beer hall where Bavarian leaders were meeting. Hitler fired his pistol in the air and declared, "The national revolution has begun." What followed was total confusion. His plan quickly unraveled, and the coup ended in a gunfight that left 16 Nazis and 4 policemen dead. Hitler was arrested 2 days later. The so-called Beer Hall Putsch failed miserably, but ironically, his trial gave him national attention and helped him rise to power a decade later. A failed revolution in a pub would eventually change the world. The Limerick Soviet, 1919, when workers ran a city. Now let's go to Ireland, 1919. The Irish War of Independence was underway, and tensions between workers, the British government, and local authorities were running high. In the city of Limerick, after a local trade union leader died during an anti-British protest, workers decided they'd had enough. They took over the city, literally. For almost 2 weeks, the workers of Limerick controlled transportation, food distribution, and even printed their own money, stamped with the words Limerick Soviet. They weren't communists in the strict sense. The term Soviet was used symbolically to show worker unity. During their brief rule, the city functioned surprisingly well. Trains ran, bakeries operated, and morale was high. Eventually, British troops surrounded the area and imposed a blockade, forcing the workers to give up control. But for those 12 days, Limerick stood as one of the strangest and most peaceful revolutions in modern history. The Glorious Revolution, 1688, a bloodless coup. England's Glorious Revolution might be one of the oddest in European history because it was a revolution without much fighting. In 1688, English nobles were fed up with King James II, who was Catholic in a largely Protestant country. Instead of rising up in arms, they simply invited William of Orange, a Protestant ruler from the Netherlands, to come and take the throne. William landed in England with a modest army, but there was almost no resistance. James fled to France, and William and his wife Mary were crowned without a battle. The result? A revolution that completely changed England's monarchy and government, but with hardly a drop of blood spilled. It's often described as the most polite revolution in history. The Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. The slave uprising that succeeded. The Haitian Revolution is strange not because it was funny or small, but because it was the only successful slave revolt in world history. It began in 1791 in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, where enslaved Africans rose up against brutal plantation owners. Inspired by the ideals of liberty from the French Revolution, they demanded freedom and equality. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the rebellion survived multiple French invasions, foreign blockades, and civil wars. By 1804, Haiti declared independence, becoming the first free black republic in the world. It shocked every colonial power and terrified European empires that relied on slave labor. Haiti's revolution wasn't just strange, it was revolutionary in every sense, rewriting what freedom meant in the modern world. The Taiping Rebellion, 1850 to 1864. The Heavenly Kingdom. In the mid-19th century, China faced one of the strangest and deadliest uprisings in history, the Taiping Rebellion. It was led by Hong Xiuquan, a man who believed he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, sent to reform China. After failing his civil service exams multiple times, Hong had visions that convinced him he had a divine mission. He gathered followers and declared himself ruler of a new state, the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. At its peak, his army controlled huge parts of southern China and even captured the city of Nanjing. But the rebellion spiraled into chaos. What started as a religious revolution turned into one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, with an estimated 20 to 30 million deaths. The Taiping Rebellion was strange because it mixed Christianity, mysticism, and politics into one massive, tragic war that nearly tore China apart. The Revolution of the Beards, 1965. When hair was political. In the 1960s, the world was full of revolutions, civil rights, youth movements, and counterculture protests. But in the African nation of Burundi, one revolution stood out, because it was all about facial hair. In 1965, Burundi's ruler King Mwambutsa IV was facing political instability. When tensions rose between the Hutu and Tutsi ethnic groups, he fled the country, leaving power uncertain. In the chaos, government officials started mocking rival politicians based on whether they had beards or not, and soon, the bearded faction and the clean-shaven faction literally became rival political groups. The local press jokingly called it the Revolution of the Beards. It sounds absurd, but it reflected a real identity crisis, a battle between traditionalism and modernism played out through something as simple as grooming. Eventually, a coup ended the debate, and the beard revolution faded into history. The Potato Revolution, 1905, when food sparked a riot. Sometimes, revolutions don't start with ideology, they start with hunger. In 1905 in Estonia, then part of the Russian Empire, peasants had endured years of famine, high taxes, and exploitation. When a bad harvest hit and local authorities started confiscating potatoes to feed Russian soldiers, the peasants snapped. They rose up in what became known as the Potato Revolution. Villagers stormed manors, took back their crops, and refused to hand food over to the military. Though it was part of the wider 1905 Russian Revolution, the Estonian uprising stood out for how literal its motivation was. It wasn't about politics, but potatoes. Eventually, it was brutally suppressed, but it became a symbol of how even small injustices can spark big revolts when people are pushed to the edge. The Soccer War, 1969, when football started a war. This one sounds like satire, but it really happened. In 1969, tensions between El Salvador and Honduras had been rising due to land disputes and immigration issues. Then came a series of World Cup qualifying matches between the two nations. The games turned violent, fans rioted, property was destroyed, and nationalist propaganda took over. Within weeks, a brief but deadly 4-day war broke out between the two countries. Though the conflict had deeper political roots, it became known worldwide as the Soccer War. It's one of the strangest examples in history of how sports, something meant to unite people, ended up igniting an actual armed conflict. The Carnation Revolution, 1974, when flowers replaced guns. In 1974, Portugal underwent one of the most peaceful revolutions ever, one led by soldiers armed with flowers instead of bullets. The country had been under a dictatorship for decades, and the military had grown tired of endless colonial wars in Africa. So on April 25, 1974, they staged a coup, but with a twist. Citizens poured into the streets, cheering on the soldiers. Instead of violence, people handed the soldiers red carnations, which they placed in the barrels of their rifles. Within 24 hours, the dictatorship collapsed and democracy was restored. Not a single shot was fired. The Carnation Revolution is one of the most beautiful and surreal revolutions in modern history, proof that sometimes peace really does conquer power. The Velvet Revolution, 1989, the power of theater and music. Finally, we have the Velvet Revolution of Czechoslovakia, one of the most poetic uprisings of the 20th century. After decades of communist rule, citizens began gathering in Prague to demand democracy. But instead of chaos, they brought guitars, candles, and songs. Led by playwright Václav Havel, artists, students, and ordinary people filled the streets in peaceful protest. The movement grew so large that the government couldn't ignore it. And within weeks, the regime collapsed without major violence. It was called the Velvet Revolution because of how smooth and gentle it was, a transition of power without bloodshed, driven by creativity and unity. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, proving that art and courage can sometimes topple even the toughest regimes.